Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's episode of the CSAE podcast, Best Minds in Associations. My name is Tyrone Adams. I am the president-elect for the CSAE board. Today, we're going to be talking about tips on leadership and how to stay balanced. We have Bob Golding here, who is our president of CSAE this year. He's going to share with us a lot of different tips. We're just going to have a basic conversation to help you guys navigate through your opportunities to be leaders or as leaders, and to make sure that we're all doing the best job we can to be effective. But before we get started, I want to introduce Joan T Zack, who is our phenomenal executive director for CSAE, and she has a few words that she wants to share with us. JT?
Thank you, Ty. I am so excited that we are launching this new CSAE podcast series. We will be offering the second Wednesday of the month a podcast, new topics each time, and these will be thought-provoking, and they can make a difference in your association, your company, but most of all, your life. And then on the fourth Wednesday of each month, we will offer a second part of the podcast featuring an influencer in the association community who you need to know. We have wanted to bring a provocative and interesting podcast series to the association community for many years, and we have an impressive lineup of speakers we know you will find valuable insights from. 2021 is the year that we are realizing this vision, and we wish you all the best. With that, Ty, introduce our first speaker.
All right. Thank you, JT. So we have Bob Golding. Before I ask him to give us a brief overview of who he is as a leader and his travels or his journey through multiple associations, I just want to share with you, that I've had the opportunity to work with Bob for over 15, going on 16 years. And I would just like to say that our relationship started off with him being my boss, and then it kind of turned into him being a mentor to me and taking me down a path and a journey that helped me to become who I am today. And I just want to share that and just say I appreciate that. And Bob, I just want to turn that over to you now. And why don't you just give us a brief overview about your journey as a leader in these associations and how you stayed balanced for so long?
Thanks, Ty. Thanks for those kind words. Really, really does mean a lot to me. And I think the part you left off now is that we are friends and we are colleagues. And so it's been a wonderful relationship, and I'm very blessed to have you in my life. It kills me when I hear you call me a leader, because quite frankly, I've never really pictured myself as a leader. I've had some wonderful opportunities and a very blessed career, but I think I always look back and think there's other people that are true leaders. So one thing I would recommend to everybody is that having a little bit of humility and being humble is a key part. So, my career, I was thinking about it this morning. I really stumbled into association management. It was the early 80s in Florida. I got my business degree, Florida Atlantic University. I wanted to work for a developer. But for those of you that are old enough to remember, the early 80s was not a good time to be a developer because, it was a recession and interest rates were high. So I got a job at the Fort Lauderdale Association of Realtors. And the only reason I took the job is because I needed a job. I needed pay. I needed money in my bank account. I never intended on staying with realtor associations or association management for that matter. And here I sit 30 plus years later, and it's been a blessed career. I was very fortunate. I had some wonderful opportunities, like working as CEO of the Colorado Association of Realtors with Ty, and I've met some wonderful people along the way. And now I run an organization called the Water Design Build Council. We have about 50 members, primarily large engineering firms. So you can imagine the challenge of working with engineers. They're 100% of them are smarter than me, but it's been just to answer your question, Ty, it's been a blessed career, and I'm very happy for where I'm at, and I'm really honored to be the president of CSAE.
Well, thanks, Bob. I still remember when you first came in. You were still interviewing for the job. And I remember you coming to my office, and at the time I was a communications director. And the first thing that stood out to me was you asked about me and my family. And you didn't have the job yet, but you really wanted to know more about me. You didn't ask about what I did. You didn't ask, how long I've been there. you just want to know about me and my family. And I really appreciate that. And I was like, wow. And I remember Tom Shack and the other leaders coming back to me and to the rest of the senior staff asking us, who will we choose? I got to say, overwhelmingly, it was you. But I think that was the first sign of your leadership and how you really reached out to you, and your leadership traits were actually shown or on display at that time. I know you just wrote an article recently for the winter issue of the Executive Edge. You talked about a key component of leadership as having the ability to allow yourself to have the courage to show up and predict and control the outcomes and allow yourself to be vulnerable. What do you mean by that statement?
Yeah, good question, Ty. And I actually do remember when I walked into your office and asked that, because what you all didn't know is I was interviewing you too, right? I mean, I'm like, I don't want to go to work if this guy ties a whack job. I'm not going to take the job. But as it turns out, all is well. I referred in my article to an author, Brene Brown, who's written a number of books. And ironically, when you read about leadership, et cetera, and you think, well, yeah, one of my fantastic, successful colleagues recommended this book. My wife, Kathy, recommended this book. She's a very unique, a little bit of a spiritual writer, but she's really done some great things on leadership. And I think, you asked me, what did it mean? And particularly the vulnerability part. It's about releasing control. It's about relying on others. And these are my takes, Ty. These are not, this is what I got out of the book. Accepting that the outcome may not be what you want it to be or what you thought it would be. Brene Brown's, she defines vulnerability as uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. And for so many years, those were just weaknesses. Those were traits that if you showed those in the role as a CEO or a manager or anything, you'd be crucified because people would say, you're not strong, you're not tough. And so, that's really, I learned a lot from that, but I've learned a lot over the years. What really means, what's a true meaning of leadership and how can you be an effective leader? But I think all of that vulnerability piece is just letting it go.
Yeah, but who likes to be known as vulnerable, right? Or who likes to show their vulnerable side?
No one.
But along with being vulnerable sometimes or showing our vulnerability, people like to take advantage of that. So how did you cope with that in your journey to when you showed your vulnerability side, not to let people take advantage of those traits?
Yeah, great question. To me, when you talk about that vulnerable leadership, it's a mindset, it's a willingness to let go. And quite frankly, it's not for everyone. Just because we talk about it now doesn't mean everybody's practicing it. I know plenty of people in leadership roles that are still the military kind of toughness, don't show a weakness, don't show a crack. That's just not me anymore. And I've had, and maybe we'll have a minute in a little bit, but I've had some things happen in my life that's changed the way I live. And when I talk about live, it's how I work and how I relate to my friends and how I connect with my family and my wife, Kathy. And so, it is a mindset, but I will tell you specifically to your question, you're right. People will look at that and potentially see it as a weakness and will have negative intentions. And, part of being a good leader is having that filter and knowing and seeing that. And that's times when you might have to be tough and you might have to be straightforward and you might have to get in someone's face and say, hey, wait a minute, you're trying to take advantage of me. You're trying to take advantage of this situation and I'm not going to have it. I'm still the CEO, I'm still the executive director, and it's my call, and this stops now.
Wow, I'm having flashbacks. I think I heard that a time or two before, right?
I don't think so. You might have heard it. It wasn't pointed at you, though. I could tell you that. Some of our fellow employees, maybe. Yeah, for sure.
So we know that, we could read all the different books, and now with the evolution of the internet, you can Google what it takes to be a great leader, but that has evolved. And like you said, that your thoughts of what it meant to be a leader when you first got started to where you are now, things change. So in your opinion, what are some of the traits that you feel would make someone a great or effective leader?
I guess, and I alluded to this in my article, we all take ourselves and the organization and situations that we turn into crises. We all take it all just way too seriously. And in my article, I mentioned, and I probably shared this story with you, I was facilitating a merger between three associations in Florida that went horribly bad. I set up there were like 60 people in the room, and I mixed their name tags up so they were all sitting together. And as they came in the room, they took their name tag and they moved it so that they were sitting with their fellow directors from their association. So that was a bad start right out of the gate. But we were about 2 hours in, and they were just bickering, and it just was unbelievable. And I just had this notion in my head, and I stood up on one of the chairs and I literally yelled, "Hey, you guys, this is just a realtor association. We're not finding the cure to cancer. We're not resolving peace. So get a grip on yourself and let's go down the right road." And so, my message there is that I think I'm sorry, there just can't be anything in an association of any type, any organization, that's so serious that you lose your mind, or your health goes bad, or you get some emotional damage to yourself. So, just kind of keeping things in perspective. And I used to tell leader, I think, Ty, maybe you do this, but anytime we get a volunteer leader, I always ask them the question, where is being the president of the Colorado Association of Realtors rank in your priorities of your life? And if they say that it's in the top 3 at all, I stop them right in their tracks. And I'm like, you need to reprioritize your life, because it can't be above your family. It can't be above your health. It can't be above if you have spiritual beliefs, any of those things. So I think that's a big part of it. I've learned over the years, sometimes in a difficult way, trust, integrity, being humble, keeping your ego in check, kind of saying what you do and do what you say. My wife was with CoBank for a long time, and they had an extraordinary CEO there by the name of Bob Engel, who has since retired. But he shared one time in their big corporate meeting, he asked them all, there was 500 people in this room, and he said, does the audio match the video? Think about that, right? So what Bob Engel's message was, are you doing what you say you're going to do? Are you integrous? Right, walking the walk. So, those are the kind of things, Ty, that I think, and some things come up every day for me, but I think those are some of the concrete traits that I try to live by.
Yeah. So I love that. I love that, what you just said. And I think another piece I would like to add to that is transparency for me, as a trait as a leader. Being transparent with your leadership, with your members, with your staff. But we know that can also be tricky sometimes, because as leaders, we can't always divulge everything. So how would you navigate that aspect of that, about being transparent without really divulging things that are told to you in confidence or that you can't even share right now?
Well, it's tricky. And you're right. I mean, that's a difficult one, because you want to try to do everything you can to be transparent, but also honest, integrous, trustworthy, et cetera, particularly when you're dealing with your team. For me, I try, and I will emphasize try, because I don't succeed every single day, but I learned this along the way. I try to look in the mirror every day, and I try to recite how I want to live.
Yeah.
How do I want my day to go today? And then I try every night to end my day with, for most of us, usually when you brush your teeth or whatever the case might be, how did I do? How did I do for those goals and those things that I set in the morning? And I think that if you keep those things in mind, you will just ultimately do the right thing, and they will come to you, and you'll understand, when you talk about what you should and shouldn't say. I believe. I'm personally a fan of meditation and prayer. I thought that was just silly stuff in the beginning of my career. I thought it was a waste of 20 minutes or a half hour. How can you waste 20 minutes to a half hour of your day? You're so important. You're so busy. But it works for me. So I think, Ty, I just, my gut tells me the right thing to do.
Yeah. Okay. So you talked earlier about, some traps that people fall into and that you fell into earlier in your career that some leaders fall into, which is they take everything so serious. As leaders or upcoming leaders, what other traps should we look out for that can really consume us to take us away from being the effective, great leaders that we are supposed to be?
Yeah. And I guess I will refer to my earlier days of my career when all that mattered to me was salary and title, and then what's going to come next for Bob. And I lived a very presumptuous life. I just figured that, I'm on that track. And listen, I've had like I said earlier, I've had a wonderful career, and I'm so, so grateful for everything that's happened for me. And those growth opportunities came, and with it came the money, which I now know was important, particularly when you have a young family, but not the most important thing, obviously, in the whole scheme of things. But I think some of the traps and again, I can only speak for myself. I spent a lot of time trying to impress people, trying to be someone maybe that I really wasn't. I didn't rely on others because I envisioned that as a weakness. It was kind of perceived that if you're not strong enough to make your own decisions, then, what's wrong with you? What kind of a leader are you? So, being able to come to people and say, I'm in a quandary. I don't know what to do. And, what would you do if you were me? Or how do you think we should handle that? Letting your ego get in the way is such a huge one. And, fortunately at this stage of my career, I mean, my job now, I'm assuming is probably going to be the last one by choice, totally by choice. But, you just got to let your ego go, and you got to be humble. And for so long, I think I lived a life of trying to be someone that I really wasn't. And then again, it goes back to, you're keeping yourself in check. And so, and listen, let me tell you something about that morning and evening. There are days when I didn't do very well. There's just simple days when I go through my checklist. I go, well, that wasn't such a great day, but what are you going to do? I'm going to do better tomorrow.
That's right.
So I don't want to give anybody listening to this podcast the wrong impression. I still make ample mistakes, but I think a good leader is one that's willing to accept who they are and admit when they make mistakes. I mean, Ty, you experienced that with me at the Realtor Association. I mean, I made plenty of mistakes over the years, but you got to step up and say, this is what happened. I apologize, and this is how we're going to fix it.
Well, I think that goes back to that transparency piece and being vulnerable, all the different traits you talked about earlier. And I do remember one other thing that you used to always say in our staff meetings, or maybe even in our board meetings, which was that you didn't want to be the smartest person in the room, that you weren't the smartest person in the room. And then you would call out people that you felt like were smarter than you. I remember you used to call out Ted Leidy and Rachel Reed, and you're like, well, wow. At first, I didn't get that when I was first listening to that, but now I understand, because that is something I took away from your leadership style. And I will say that now, because it is okay for me not to be the smartest person in the room. And as a matter of fact, I shouldn't be the smartest person in the room when it comes to my team, because I'm hiring them to do a job. And I want to hire the best talent possible. So I really do appreciate that of you as well.
And I've never struggled with not being the smartest person in the room. That's always come pretty naturally. But, one of the things my dad used to say is good leaders surround themselves with people smarter than themselves, right? And that's a tough statement for a lot of people, because there's a lot of leaders, CEOs, executive directors, et cetera, managers, they'd never say that because they're unwilling to admit it. But the reality is that, you surround yourself, try with people that are smart, and particularly recognizing what they know in a particular area. You mentioned Ted and Rachel with governmental, legislative, regulatory stuff. Absolutely. So it isn't that hard to do if you let yourself do it.
Right. So with all that being said, we know that this job can be very stressful, and you shared some of the tips that you use to kind of keep yourself balanced. And I think to some degree, the term or the phrase work-life balance becomes almost cliche-ish. What are your thoughts on that? And do you believe that's sustainable in an organization? I mean, to be effective when you're trying to be really effective.
Well, it's interesting. We just did a podcast earlier that we talked with someone from the National Strength and Conditioning Organization, and what a critical part of their membership and what they do for their members. So, sustainable, I guess that's defined in many different ways. For me, personally, and you know this, Ty, because you're my friend. I mean, I'm a stage 4 melanoma cancer survivor, and I'm 6 years out, thank God. That changed everything in my life, not just how I run an organization and not just how I see little things. It changed everything. I tell people that I see things now that I just did see. Might be a cloud. It might be a perfect cold IPA. I just see things differently. And so, it really goes back to priorities in your life. And I've got mine straight. There's no question about it. And I can tell you my job is not in the top 3. And it's close, but it just isn't. And so, that balance piece, I think, is finding peace within yourself. And like I mentioned earlier, I mean, what's helped me is prayer and meditation. But, my dog Lucy, who's sitting right next to me right now, she brings a lot of joy in my life, and I learn from her because of the way she lives. Of course, she sleeps most of the day, and I try not to do that. But yeah, I think that balance piece, and I think with the impact that COVID has had on us, it's really allowed us to define that a little bit clearer about what that balance looks like. But, again, it's about happiness. It's not happiness 100% of the time, but just finding that balance in your entire life, not just your work life, but your entire life, that can help you, go to bed at night and feel good about your life and look forward to waking up in the morning.
Yeah. I totally agree with you on that. I do believe in work-life balance. And I would tell you, for me, I think that it's when it's out of whack, when it's out of balance, I don't sleep well. I'm not as effective the next day because I'm tired, maybe not thinking. And so a lot of things kind of crumble around you. So I do agree with you that work-life balance is very important. And we all have to find our own way to make sure that we have that type of balance in our life. As you mentioned earlier, what'd you say? You said, you know what? We're not curing anything by being a leader of an association.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it does go back to the fact that what's the worst thing that's going to happen?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, yeah, exactly. I mean, you might lose a member, or you might have a member that's angry and stuff. But and listen, I've talked a lot of people off the plank over my years, just trying to explain to them, particularly volunteer leadership. Hey, listen, it's not that big a deal. Just this is all going to, and I guess that's the other thing, Ty, is that another thing that I firmly believe in is letting go and accepting, and that's part of the vulnerability piece, accepting that sometimes things are just not in all of our control, and they're going to end up exactly how they're supposed to. And you better get ready to accept it. And quite frankly, I've found that an easier way to live because it takes pressure off you. I'm not saying you don't make the tough decisions and you don't do the work, et cetera, but sometimes things just aren't going to be worked out by your awesome execution and leadership.
Right. They are what they are, right?
Yep.
We just endured a pandemic. And this is probably one of the last questions I'm going to ask you, but I just want to know, how did you navigate through this pandemic, and what were some of the changes that you had to make as a leader? Because as leaders, we have to pivot. We have to be flexible. And this pandemic, this showed us nothing else, is that there's people who thrived and succeeded in this pandemic because they were able to pivot and be flexible. But what were some of the things you did during this pandemic to ensure that your association was still solvent, still viable, still credible, all those good things?
Sure. Well, my wife, Kathy, the biggest pivot both of us had was that we were together all the time. And that's a lot harder on her.
I feel bad for Kathy.
Yeah, it's a lot harder on her than it is on me, I can tell you that. You know, it's a little unique, Ty, for myself and for our organization because the Water Design Build Council is only 15 years old and it's been virtual forever. So there's never been a bricks and mortar office. Everything is done remotely. We would meet quarterly. And so that's been difficult. We'd have quarterly board meetings that we haven't had. We've had to do it with Teams or Zoom. So yeah, I don't know. You know, I personally been making it up as I go along. It's hard for our members to not connect, and we all look forward to when that time comes. So I think that a lot for me is kind of looking. Another thing my dad used to say, you know, look in the windshield, don't look in the rearview mirror. And so, you know, we're all hoping for better times in all aspects of our life, whether it's our associations or our family, our friends, whatever. So I don't know, Ty, that I made any massive pivots other than accepting what it is. And then I have found silver linings. I mean, you and I have talked about it offline, some things that have changed for the better. You know, Lucy and I go for a walk every single day because I can.
Right. You're not at the office.
Yeah. You know, just, you know, trying to focus on the family, trying to exercise more, which, you know, when you're in an office for 10 or 12 hours a day, it's awfully difficult to do. Trying, and I'll emphasize trying to eat right. That's been a bit of a challenge in the pandemic because it's like, you know, I remember in the beginning, you know, every 20 minutes, I can just get up and go to the kitchen. This is awesome. And then just, you know, finding your own personal peace and coming comfortable with that and living life in a good way.
Yeah. All right. Well, Bob, thank you so much. Do you have any last minute tips or thoughts that you want to share with the audience?
You know, I really don't. I appreciate that. I hope someone listens to this podcast. I don't know if I saw the title and the speaker, I'd probably go watch something else. But I hope our members got some benefit. I think the last thing I'd share, Ty, is there's nothing special about me. You know, I'm just a guy that's had some wonderful opportunities. I'm blessed. I've had a blessed career. I'm blessed with my family. I'm blessed with friends like you. And so that's really what's helped me to be, I'll say, the leader, not the perfect leader, but the leader that I've been given the opportunity to be.
Well, Bob, that is awesome. You're an awesome person. Thank you for being my boss for over 10 years and becoming my mentor. And then, like you said, evolving into a friendship that has been everlasting. And I look forward to remaining your friend for many, many more years to come. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Bob Golden right there, sharing his thoughts with us on leadership and how to balance our lives along with our roles and responsibilities within our associations. I just want to take a moment to remind you all to take time out to make sure that you listen to this podcast, but also listen to the other ones. This is something very new, as JT alluded to, but we're very excited about this opportunity to bring to you some of the best minds in the association world and just share their thoughts, their opinions. I'm sure I just gained something from this discussion with Bob today, and I'm doing the interview, and we've been friends for a very long time, but I still gained some other insights and things that I'm going to use for me as in my journey as I continue to be a leader within the association ranks. Also, you can also there's a lot of resources that I don't think people take advantage of enough through the CSAE website. You can go to csae.org and check that out. There's a lot of resources there for us to be better leaders and more effective leaders. And then also don't forget our social media pages. You got Facebook, you got Twitter, you have LinkedIn. And I think that you will find all those things very beneficial for your journey as leaders in this association. All right. Thank you guys all and have a great day.